starting to work on cultivating some of the outliers and having a lot of fun with it. So the other thing I do is foraging, and so I forage all kinds of wild food around here. I also have 10 acres in northern Minnesota, so I forage there. I've learned about foraging all around the country, from the desert Southwest to the Pacific Northwest, almost all the way to Canada in the north, and then a lot of time in the central here. If the only area I lack having foraged actively is the Northeast. So there may be some things up there I'm not familiar with, but there's a whole lot of stuff that God offers for us out here, and it's my goal is to improve your health through wild and natural food. Okay, and yeah, it's how I was raised from that big. Grew up eating daylilies and cactus fruit and yeah, all kinds of wild things that were out there. And so yeah, so I'm here today to talk about mushrooms, and yeah, I can go lots of different directions, and so it's a small group, so we've probably got time to talk about everything that each of you wants to hear about. So at the basic level, is anybody interested in cultivating some maybe on your farm, in small scale, hobby kind of, grew some mushrooms? Because I can cover that. Okay, great. So that's kind of the basis of where I kind of went with the outline here, okay? And I think it's important to understand the mushroom life cycle if you're going to, try that. Or if you're, interested in foraging and stuff like that too. The mushroom life cycle is a little bit different. People don't generally know that mushrooms are fruit. Okay, they carry the seed that makes them fruit. When you have a mushroom come up, what you would eat, we call that the fruit body. Okay, so as the outline shows you there, the mushroom life cycle, it starts with the spore, and then we go to agar, and that's this kind of stuff here, and I'll just pass these around here. I got 3 examples here of agar. We've got this is a beefsteak mushroom. That's from wild clone, okay, not from spore. So I took and cloned some of the living tissue from a beefsteak mushroom. And yeah, that was last year, been a whole year. So I took that and yeah, I propagated it. And this one has some little bit of probably contamination you can kind of see in there, but look at how it turns just blood red, okay? That's not the color of the stuff. It's the same stuff that this is on here, okay? And this is an agar, but this is just something I thought was interesting, a visual aid, y'all can pass them around there. This one's lion's mane with all these little dots on it in here. This one's oyster mushroom, typical oyster mushroom, and that's the beefsteak. So that's agar, okay? And so, this is what we want to do in cultivating. The level that I'm at, I'll go out in the wild, find a mushroom I like, and I'll clone it like that beefsteak right there. And then it's several years process to see if I can grow that. So I'm a year in now. I have some big buckets out that are growing up right now with that, and we'll see. In the wild, the fruit is back on the source from the wild again right now. Mine's not fruiting yet, so, this is to say you can do a lot of work in mushroom farming and get nothing, right? So it takes a lot of patience, okay? But it's so much fun too. I mean, when I took that beefsteak and got that to grow out like that, that's like practically unheard of. I mean, they get bacterial contamination really, really bad. And so in my first year of working with the agar at this level, having that success is really exciting to me. I have several ghosts that follow me. Sorry about that. It may happen again. Okay. All right. So basically, to start cultivating yourself, you're going to kind of start from what you've got in those agar dishes right there. Okay. What we do is we take that and then put that into grain. Okay. The grain is sterilized. So it's not that hard to get to that level with your own cultivation. You can buy agar source like this, agar plates, and take some grain, maybe some rye grain or millet grain, sorghums work well. Rye is kind of preferred, rye berry. And you could take that and cook it in a pressure cooker. Probably most of you have a pressure cooker, or access to a little pressure cooker. And yeah, you can sterilize. You can almost sterilize with a typical, pressure cooker, right? You can get super pasteurization, almost. In the lab, we really need a little bit higher temperature, 250 minimum, 275 if you want to be real serious, and we're starting more and more to investigate these things, okay? Like, I had some doctors from the university come out and they're doing a study on why things are and how things are getting resistant to sterilization techniques in hospitals. Okay, like why is MRSA living and why can't we kill it, right? Okay, so she's doing studies like that, finding out that these things, they can be like resistant to alcohol. They can build a tolerance to alcohol. And I thought that was just so interesting, so I just thought I would share that as I stumbled along here across that. So, but yeah, it's not undoable to take something like that. You can source that, you can cook some grain and make your own spawn, right? So the reason I kind of go to that level is because the results that you can get when you've taken it from that agar level and made your own spawn are 10 times more likely to be productive for you. Okay? You can buy the grain all ready to go, okay? And so, step 2 of the visual aid, we take that agar plate and we put it into sterilized grain like that. This has been, let's see, today's Saturday, right? So, yeah, Thursday. That had no growth at all, okay? And so all of those individual grains that are grown out like that, that's just, yeah, a couple of days.
What
okay.
kind of grain is that one?
This is blue oyster. Blue oyster spawn. Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. The grain
itself
is millet.
Millet. Okay.
Yeah. It's a sorghum kind of a millet. Yeah. And what am I going to say about that? Food grade is not required. So a lot of places they'll try to sell you, like food grade rye. It can be really expensive, $3-4 a pound. This stuff is like 60 cents a pound. And it works great. Yeah, it doesn't have to be food grade stuff. You're going to sterilize it anyway. You're not actually going to eat any of that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, it's just like, it doesn't need to be any cleaner than manure if you're planting your food in, compost that's going to be growing, So, the same. So, so a fresh spawn source, that's really important if you're going to try to cultivate something. So, that's the grain level there, and that's why I said, okay, start here. So start with grain. Either make yourself some grain like this, or buy some, okay? Once you've got some grain, then you've got the question of substrate, okay? And as we move down into that, we kind of get into a different area here, right? So this is kind of where the seed portion ends, right? And then the fruit production begins from there, okay? So this is our seed to plant, and you've got some questions to answer about substrates, okay? The general thing is, well, what do I have on my farm? A lot of people have logs. Okay, a lot of people have straw or hay. Okay, that can work too. Wood chips is something that's readily available, and a lot of people have can have wood chips. You've got some trees that come down. It's real easy to just tell those people, well, yeah, you took the tree down and you're going to chip it up, but I want the wood chip. Leave me the piles of wood chips because then I can take and grow mushrooms, right? Not the best idea to call them for a wood chip dump if you want to grow mushrooms. It can work, but you don't know what they're going to bring. They could bring you a bunch of cedar. And cedar has natural antimicrobial stuff in it, and your mushroom's not going to grow in cedar chips. Not at all. Okay.
What's the best one to grow it in?
It depends a little bit on the strain of mushrooms that you're growing. For the kind of pile culture that I'm going to recommend to use with wood chips, okay, you want generally hardwood. Yep. So deciduous hardwoods. not conifers. Okay? Yeah. And then of course there's compost, Now, compost, and you can see I made some notes here, compost is messy, it's smelly, it is fast, it grows really fast, and it has a high yield when you're growing mushrooms in compost. There's a lot of nutrition there, just like when you're using it in your garden, There's a lot there. So, it's, mushrooms are very much garbage in, garbage out, okay? Oh, I see, it's a book drop. I didn't
the
get
book
that
retirement,
before.
yeah.
Okay. I
Used
was
to
really
freak us out all the time, tell you.
yeah, wow, okay, thanks, yeah. All right, cool.
It'll still be ghosts, though.
Well, I still have them for sure, I'll tell you what. All right, so let's see. All right, I feel like I'm moving along pretty quickly here. So, when you get to the substrate level, right, like what do you have? That's, as I said down here, strain selection. This is what leads you to your strain selection. What kind of mushrooms you want to grow. A lot of people want to start with, gee whiz, this is the mushroom I want to grow. It's not the right place to start. The right place to start is what do I have? Then you say, okay, what substrate needs, can I meet? Okay, so this is why I put strain selection. What substrate needs can I meet? Can I provide wood chips? Can I provide logs? Okay, what do I have? And then the process needs. Okay, so you take so if you've got logs, you might look at, okay, I could grow shiitakes, or I could grow these called sword belt or peony mushrooms is another common one. Chestnut mushrooms, there's a couple of log species, and then you say, okay, well, as you look into resources like this, the mushroom cultivator, that just kind of backed off, and Stamets is probably one of the leading authorities on that, or considered to be generally on mushroom cultivation. I mean, they let him send some stuff up into space with NASA and see if they can grow reishi in space and stuff, and that's really cool, So he's got a whole lot of information out there that's good to go with. But as you start to look, okay, so I've got some logs, so that I can look up into some of these resources. What grows well on logs, and so then you find out that what the process needs. Okay, so we need cooler weather for shiitake. We need hotter weather for those sword belt mushrooms, and what do you want to do? Do you need to? Are you going to have it in a controlled environment, or are you going to have? Do you have a microclimate that likes it? That's going to be shaded most of the time. There's a lot of options, as you get dialed in, to your process needs, you get to. Well, I just segued right into the environmental needs, right? So. And then of course there's the time required. But all of these things are really important to consider before you selected your strain of mushrooms that you want to grow. Okay? So once you know that you've got the stuff, then you can, look at growing whichever mushrooms you want, But it's really a lot more difficult to say, okay, well, I want to grow lion's mane mushroom now. What could I put together for that? I mean, it's another approach, but it's not as likely to be as much fun for you or as gratifying. It's going to be a lot more difficult if you start with what is already there, what you've already got, environments you can work with, all of that stuff. Then you can succeed. Once you succeed, then you say, okay, so now I have some experience. Now, can I go grow what I want to grow? Okay, so now, I grew some oysters over here. It worked. I've got confidence. Now I can go and try and grow some lion's mane and some of these logs over here. Okay, so, and that's really important because this is a long-term thing, right? You got to be ready to invest at least 6 months. Okay, and you're not active that whole time, right? But you can't be completely inactive either. Okay, mushrooms grow best in with kind of casual neglect. You know, when I forget about something and then I go back and look, it's amazing. You know, wow, look what grew up. But if I watch it every day and look at it every day, it seems like it just doesn't want to grow.
Try and watch water boil or something.
Yeah.
Just like
Is
that.
there a mushroom that's like really good for beginners, or is it just totally dependent on your condition?
You know, generally, oysters are going to fall into the beginning category for most people. And most people are going to have the resources to satisfy what some strains of oysters need. Okay? I have a friend, she just wanted to grow some oysters, and she set out to, she saw some pink oysters, right? And she said, oh, that's the one I want to grow, right? And she got lucky in that she hit it the right time of year to grow them. She did you might have heard of like the laundry basket culture, you know, the old school laundry basket with all the holes in it, right? And yeah, it didn't work out for her, but that one is real particular. It's what we call a hot spawn, and so the temperatures have to be in this range, and so there's only one time in during the year, a short window, where that outdoor cultivation has any chance of success here. Okay, so I don't want to give you the misnomer of saying oysters are all the beginner level. Okay, all right. So if you're going to grow something in the wintertime, then blue oyster is great for this area. They grow really well. If you're more spring, fall, more variation, and that's where you're going to grow, then probably you want to look at white oysters. Okay, if you've got a long-term, okay, I've got a tree stump here that I want to see got rid of, I've inoculated them with pearl oyster and had incredible results. 30, 40 pound flushes coming up of pearl oysters, so. Yeah. All right. All right. So, let's see. So yeah, the particular processes. What I recommend is logs or wood chips to start, and then into straw or hay. Once you know that this is something that you're interested in doing. Okay. So with logs. All right, for visual aid here, log. This is hackberry. Okay, hackberry is an awesome wood for shiitake cultivation. Okay, it's really, really hard, and I've had logs this size produce shiitake for 5 years with no problem. Okay, and so you can see all the holes that are drilled in there, right? What's important is the diameter and the depth of the hole. So I couldn't find my drill bit. It's hiding somewhere on my farm, okay? But it's got just a little stopper collar, okay, that stops it from going too deep. All right, so that's also important. And so I offer a free log clinic every Thanksgiving, okay, on my farm. And if you follow me on the Facebook or whatever, I always put that up. I'll be putting up a notice for that to sign up pretty soon. So yeah, these are actually like they're actually 20 millimeters. I think it's like 781 thousandths, so a little bit over 3/4 of an inch. Okay. They make drills for it. Source them. If you're interested in that, based on the spawn that you're going to use. Okay, if you source some plug spawn, they're dowels that are sized at a certain size, and so then there's a corresponding drill bit for those.
Do you reuse those?
Reuse them? No. I mean, it'll fruit for 5 years though once it's inoculated. So, yeah. But were you talking about like biological cycling to grow one species and then grow another species after that? Is that what you're talking about, or? That is done.
I have no idea.
Okay. That is done. I'm not quite at that level yet. I'm working on being at that level with my ground substrate, which is kind of another level that I didn't really put on here. I put all the logs, straw, wood chips, and compost. I didn't put fake logs down, and that's really what I do. is. Yeah.
That hackberry is, it's not green, but it, how dry, I mean,
Yeah, this has been seasoned a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
I think it's almost a year, but not outside.
Okay.
You know, it's been undercover, but yeah, yeah, you're right. It's not green. The bark is well attached still.
Yeah.
That's important. There's no other competing mycelial colony, which I can tell by looking at the ends of the logs here. Okay, that's also important. Yeah, there's not a lot of benefit. In fact, might be a downside to using wood that's super fresh. I want to let it dry some because, you know, moisture carries all kinds of contaminant with it, right? There's no two ways about that. And so the greener that it is, the more stuff that the mushroom has to fight off to survive. Okay, so yeah, basically with the logs, so you would get one of those drills. Like I said, size it to, if you're going to use dowels for spawn instead of making grain or buying grain like I had there, then size it by that. Okay, this is a tool that's made to put that kind of spawn, grain spawn, or sawdust spawn, you know, whichever your source is. This tool will work well for it. And basically, you can see the thing just, you know, pop out right there, right? So it comes out past the end of this. That's so that when we put some of this grain in here, and we just empty some of that out, and I just stab it in here and get it going, and I show all of this in my log clinic, and then you just take it and stick it over here and put it in there, and it pushes it down into the hole and countersinks it down in there, right? So it's below the surface. Then you take wax and a little wax dauber and you cover it over in wax. It doesn't have to be beeswax. You know, paraffin works just fine. You know, I'm not aware of any super detrimental environmental impact. You know, as far as paraffin wax goes. You know, no, so it's not that bad, and it's a lot cheaper than some beeswax. You know, but there are purists that say, oh no, I want it all natural, I gotta use beeswax, and that's fine too, okay?
What is that tool called?
Yeah, I call it an inoculator.
Oh.
And so when you look for spawn, okay, most of the places that are offering spawn or agar plates for sale will offer something like this, okay? They tend to be $20, they might be $30, you know, nowadays. I mean, it's been a minute since I bought it, I guess, right? But they last pretty good, you know, and yeah, you know, it's really worth it for doing a couple of logs even, you know. It's a lot of hassle to just try and get the spawn in there otherwise, you know. I'm a machinist by trade. I could have made a little tool and I would have had it here to show you, this is how easy it is to make a little thing, okay? It's not, I bought it, okay? It's like, wow, okay, you know? So, all right, so yeah, and that's basically it. You would put the spawn in from there, you'd seal that with the wax, you let that log, you take it and set it out, leave it in contact with the ground, okay? Because it has to have that connection to maintain its moisture content, basically, okay? It has to have, okay, at least indirect contact with the ground, okay? So you can take and stack like a log cabin, right? And the logs that are stacked on the other logs are still okay. They'll still fruit and everything, right? But it's like if you take it and you put your log on a concrete pad or something, no, it's not gonna fruit. Like never, okay? You know, so it's got to have some sort of indirect contact with the ground, okay? So, and that's basically it. If you do logs like that, then it's weight, okay? And don't give up because it might be 2 years, okay? So yeah, not much else to do until you start to see some mushrooms come up, right? After a good rain.
So you seal it with a wax, you totally cover it, and it will come out through there?
Well, okay. Yeah. You cover the hole with the wax, 9 times out of 10, that is not where the mushroom comes out.
Oh.
Yeah, this is just it's just the inoculation point. In fact, it's kind of a damaged area where the mushroom does not want to come out. The mushroom wants to emerge through the bark of the tree like it would in nature. It's protected under the bark, right? Most of the time that wax will fall off within 6 months to a year, okay? And that's fine, the seed has taken its effect, the mycelial colony has started to grow. Look at how fast it grows in the spring, right? So it starts to grow into the wood, and once it's, sparked off like that, the hole is now irrelevant. Now the hole's a contamination point. And yeah, it's very unlikely.
So that's why you wouldn't reuse the wood, because it's contaminated after? Is that
Well, when the mushroom's done after 4 years, 5 years, that is a pile of rot.
oh, okay.
Yeah, I can take it and make compost on it. Yeah, the mushroom's very aggressive that way. Yeah, in fact, I've got several log culture piles that I need to remediate and bring back in. In fact, that's what I'm gonna try and use for my beefsteak mushroom, because it likes more advanced decay material, and that's where we get into biological cycling. Yeah, because different mushrooms will eat different parts and use different, areas of the wood. And so in nature, we find a log with shiitake growing over here and oyster mushrooms growing over there and lion's mane growing out the other side. And sometimes it's, this year it grew blue oyster, and then the next year it grew the lion's mane, and then, the following year, now there's beefsteak mushroom on it. What's going on? Well, they're just taking turns, taking their preferred nutrients out of the wood, and so,
Are there any animals that'll come along and eat them?
oh yeah, lots.
Do you have to protect it when it's?
I don't, but you could. I mean, sure. If you don't want the deer to eat them, yeah. And now, there's kind of no way to protect them from insects, and the insects like the mushrooms too. So in fact, several native cultures' word for mushrooms is bug house. If you literally translate, that's what they call mushrooms, is a bug house. And it's totally true. Nematodes live in mushrooms, and so microscopic worms. Okay, and some of them are actually can get quite large. So what else? Slugs, pests. Yeah, I suppose I'm ready to move on to that. So if you've got logs and you've got, mushrooms growing, yeah, pests are definitely an issue, slugs. Slugs love mushrooms. I mean, that's their main thing, and so, but slugs are not worms, okay? A worm in your mushroom is a sign that something has laid its eggs in there, and you've got to get rid of your crop. Your harvest is probably bad. A slug is not. A slug is, okay, it ate its little trail. There's a little, spot on the mushroom that got slugged. Okay, no big deal. Okay, there's not anything in there that's gonna, grow and hatch and, anything like that. So, you really kind of can't keep flies, out. So when you're cultivating mushrooms in a small scale at home on a farm or whatever, you gotta just kind of be vigilant and check them regularly, because when they sprout up, you've got a couple, 2 days, sometimes maybe a week, to where you can harvest that mushroom fresh, and it's gonna have nematodes. Something's gonna have got in there, but you're gonna cook it up and eat it before anything hatches. Okay, so and that's just part of the wild mushrooms, and that's how I consider, and you should always consider, mushrooms that are grown outside at any stage at all. That's a wild mushroom, planted or not. It lives outside. Treat it like it's a wild mushroom, because what you planted is not necessarily what's gonna come up. Okay? Yeah, I've planted shiitake from good reputable sources, and they had some sort of trouble in their grain, and I couldn't tell the difference, and they couldn't either, but they sure grew up a whole lot of Paxillus species of mushrooms, which, you know, they're not poisonous or anything like that, but it was not the shiitake that I planted, you know? But the spawn looked good, it smelled good, you know, I mean, like I said, it fooled them, fooled me all the way until it fruited, you know? So yeah, you gotta be vigilant and check often, and that's how you get them to be, you know, good and you know, not full of bugs and whatnot. So yeah, okay. So okay, yeah, I'll go through a couple of these other processes here. So wood chip. That's probably the second easiest, second recommended course that I would recommend for people, okay? So, you know, if you have a tree taken down or something, you know, like I said, you have it chipped up, you just tell them leave, you know, yeah, I want you to chip the wood, I want you to leave it here though. Okay, so there's a lot of mushroom species that go well with what I call pile culture, okay? And again, so you would either buy or make spawn like this. Sprayed spawn works great. And then you basically just at the right time of year, you take them wood chips and you start layering. You know, break the ground a little bit like you would for plants, right? You know, maintain that connection to nature, right? You know, and so break the ground up a little bit in a patch, and then you just put out the wood chips and you layer in the spawn. You know, layer in the spawn, put soaked cardboard down on top of that, okay, and then more wood chips, okay, and repeat, okay, couple of layers, and then water the whole thing in, and that's it, you know. Check it a couple of months later, you know. Wine cap stropharia is a real good mushroom to do that with. What else? Yeah, there's some Pholiota species, which are like chestnut mushrooms. They do pretty well around here. You can do oysters like that, but oysters kind of prefer logs. Again, you know, if you look at what you've got and use that to guide you to the mushrooms, then when you get to this point, you know, all of these things are already, you know, kind of in place. You knew that you had, you know, started with all of that, right? So, that's it. Prep, soak, water, repeat, pile, inoculate, yep. Okay. So yeah, anybody interested in using compost and doing all of the stuff extra for compost for growing some mushrooms? Because I can talk about it or not.
How do you get your mushroom? You might have already said this, like, sorry, I was at work. Where do you get your mushroom spores from?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I use some commercial sources, and then I pass these around here. So, this here. So, yeah, I recommend Field and Forest Products. They're the only second generation mushroom farm that I know of in the country that is still doing well. They're still being responsible, and they're kind of resisting the peer pressure in the industry to just do a lot of unsustainable things in the mushroom industry. So yeah, Field and Forest Products. They're out of Peshahoe, Wisconsin. They've been doing it since the 70s, and yeah, they've got good strains and sources.
How many, like one of these, what would it cover? Like,
so I expand that. I take one of those and I expand 2 jars like this. Each one of those jars will expand another 22 jars, and each one of those jars will expand another 22 jars.
that's what I was.
So where does that get you? 22 to the 22nd power? Something like that. I don't know.
Do you
I don't know. How do you take that? So this agar here, basically I get in my laminar flow hood, and I'll just take that and cut it right in half with the scalpel, and then I'll section it out in wedges. and then I'll just take and distribute those through here and shake it up real good, and yeah, it'll start growing. This is already second generation, so this was yeah, it would be first generation from here, and so that's already second generation, and so yeah, I can take that out another generation. But okay, so this is from spore, not from spore. This is from tissue culture that I made from a beefsteak mushroom I found that I liked. So I'm working on growing that. You know, that's a long hole in the tent there. This is 1 year after inoculation. Okay, and yeah, I've got some buckets right now that are out there, and the original source is fruiting right now. It's got fruit on it right now. That tree does.
So you said buckets, so you don't do logs for everything, you use buckets for some stuff?
Yep. So yeah, and that would be straw and hay. Oh yeah, I didn't cover the straw and hay. Yeah. So anybody interested in that? I kind of skipped over those. Yeah, anybody interested in straw and hay cultivation? Oysters work well with that. Okay, so yeah, so for that, like this lays out here. You've got, of course, prep work. You got to pasteurize or sterilize the straw. Okay, so that's different than when you're working with the logs or the wood chips, right? The logs and the wood chips, you just start with the natural stuff, and you just use water and you let nature do its thing. Well, when you get into straw or hay, you need to somehow pasteurize or sterilize that. I prefer pasteurization to sterilization. It's easier, it's more natural. We don't live in a sterile world, right? And when you sterilize something, it's an open door for all the bad stuff to grow as well as the good stuff. Okay? So when you pasteurize or super pasteurize, you've left some of that microbiome that lives up over a certain level, you know, and that's really important to make some healthy mushrooms, you know? I mean, just like with milk, you know? Well, we don't sterilize our milk, we pasteurize it, you know? Because we need some of that, you know? And it's a really big difference right there, okay? So some will tell you that sterilization is preferred, and I'm not in that school myself, okay? So my mushrooms are a natural process.
Is the compost process more complicated? Is that what you said?
Yeah, there's another whole level and stuff, like you have to make what we call a casing, and you have to case it, and yeah, there's another whole. So when you're working with straw or hay, there's options when you pasteurize. Steam works really well. It's easy to work with, you know. Anybody can take a 55-gallon barrel and, you know, throw a turkey burner under it, okay? And, you know, like you would use to, you know, deep fry your turkey, right? And bam, you've got yourself steam power, okay? You know, that's basically my setup, okay? You know, time at temperature, and don't ever forget the time component. So many things leave out the time component, okay? You know. And then there's something to consider if you're using steam, okay? It's called, I'll try not to be too technical, but it's called the coefficient of thermal conductivity of a given material, okay? The long and short of it is that there's a lot of even high level in metallurgy, okay? This is a really big deal. That's where I learned about it, okay? This is my background as an engineer. And so time at temperature, okay? Time is the most important thing, okay? If you don't give it enough time for that temperature to get to the middle of whatever you've got, then you did not get there. You got zero, okay? You know, so how long does it take to get there, all right? So the best thing to do is, if you're gonna use steam, is test, okay? It's not that difficult. Set up a steam deal, and you put your straw in there, and you let that stuff start cooking, and you get yourself a candy thermometer, you know? Stick that in the top of the barrel in the small hole, and they just, you know, hang out in there, and you can see what temperature the steam is coming off of there. Okay, when you think that it's ready, you get in there, and, you know, you carefully get your candy thermometer down into the straw, and you say, okay, what temperature is it down in the middle of that straw? Obviously, you're gonna use a heat-resistant coil, you know, but, you know, for pasteurization, we're looking for, like I said, I feel like the new standard is about 176 degrees Fahrenheit temperature. That's a little higher than a lot of sources are probably gonna tell you, but that's what I recommend, 176. Now, I'll tell you the high threshold. It's important to not go over 181, okay? And that's a temperature that people in the food industry at least used to know about, okay? That's the level at which I feel like the microbiome dies off that you need, that the mushrooms need, okay? That's just a number that I've come up with, so I don't know any other source where you know, learn about that, okay? But that's what I personally found. At above that level, you now invite these contaminants that live in the air all over the place, and they're gonna win, okay? So, kind of a narrow window, 176 to 181, right, you know? But I mean, you know, you gotta have a goal, you gotta have a target somewhere, you know? And it's attainable. So, other options for pasteurization or sterilization, okay? Calcium hydroxide, okay, whitewash, okay? Anybody familiar with that? Okay, this is your typical water treatment chemical, okay? Used on farms that collect their own water for you know, livestock, you know, recommended use for your water treatment for drinking water, okay? You can get it at the co-op, okay? And you know, there's a certain level at which basically what you're doing with that is you're changing the pH level, okay? And so raising the pH level so high that it burns off all the bad stuff that you don't want, okay? So downsides of doing that with straw, you need a lot of water, okay? You gotta soak the stuff. It's gotta soak for maybe 24 hours, because again, time is the most important component of these equations, okay? You know, nothing just dies instantly, okay? So then you have contaminated water that will kill whatever vegetation you put it on, okay? It's not, you know, Roundup horrible, okay? So if somebody's got a small farm and they want to do this process, it could be considered helpful because, you know, you're making some kind of like, you know, something you could use to kill weeds on your farm, say in the off season, okay? Because also the same stuff, right, calcium hydroxide, is also used to add calcium to your soil for your farm, okay? But it takes a lot longer to absorb into the soil, okay? So most people are not using it for amendment. You've got to amend 3 months early, okay? And make sure that you get enough rain if you're amending with that, okay? Well, so if you've got a field and, you know, you want to do that, you know, it could just work right in there, you know? Okay, well, I planted a bunch of mushrooms, now I've got this stuff. I can, you know, spray these grasses, whatever, here in that field, and then, you know, it's gonna kill that stuff, and that's all gonna get tilled back in, and it's gonna add calcium to my soil, so that now my crops do a little bit better, I need less amendment down the line, okay? So, you know, that's another option, okay? Those are the two best ways to process straw or hay. There's other ways to do it, but those are kind of the beginner's, you know, method for that, okay? And that's the thing that my friend with the pink oysters, she didn't do. That's why she failed. She had the right time of year, she had an okay strain, she had a good substrate, she had a nice plan with her baskets. And she just put water in and yeah, and they just all contaminated. So, okay, so yeah, so then, you know, working with straw and hay, once you've got a plan for how you're gonna, you know, treat your stuff, right? Then, whatever baskets or buckets that you want to use, I take 5-gallon buckets and I drill holes in them at about a 1/2-inch hole, and I put like 12 into a 5-gallon bucket, and that's what I use, okay? So I steam up the stuff, and I make sure my bucket is real good and clean, and I take the hot substrate and I put it in the bucket, and then I take that and I put it into a cooling room, call it. It happens to be a cooler that's just sealed, right? And so I just take the buckets and then they have to cool, okay? It has to get down to where it's at a safe temperature that's not going to kill my cellium, okay? About 90 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? It's important because as it's cooling down, right, as it comes down past the threshold of temperature for killing certain microorganisms, then others, they start to multiply, okay? And, you've got some anaerobic stuff that's going to start to grow. So it's important to schedule this, tightly if, you're going to use the heat process, right? The chemical process is a bit more forgiving on that note. Basically, the heat process, your contaminant, I'm going to say, is kind of like in there already, whereas the chemical process, in theory, you've killed off all of that stuff, and the only microbiome you're going to get is whatever it gets exposed to the outside atmosphere. So I didn't write that down about cooling it, but yeah. So that would be a good note to have there. Cool. All right. Inoculate them and then incubate them. So inoculation would be basically real similar to how I described for the pile culture wood chips. You're going to basically, once the stuff is cooled, you want to take it and layer it in to whatever container you're growing them in with the spawn. Okay, and that's it. You just layer it all in, and assumably the stuff's already wet because you either steam processed it or you've chemical processed it, so the straw is all wet, right? And that's it. Inoculation at for most of the stuff that people would be growing in straw and hay does not need to be like in a sterile environment. Okay. The stuff flying around in the air is going to get in there a little bit, but again, you've got a super pasteurized thing. You want this fight to occur. Okay, the mushroom starts to metabolize the stuff, and if it doesn't have any competitors, it won't produce the right enzymes to break the stuff down and produce. Okay, and we see that a lot in. I see it a lot in GMO seed, GMO grown produce. They're so weak. You know what I mean? They don't. They'll grow like mad and produce like mad, but some contaminant gets in and crops are just devastated. Because they're genetically weak. I feel. It's probably way over my head, but it's kind of the same. It's a really more important aspect of mushroom growing, because that natural process is that fight is going on all the time for the mushroom, and that's just real critical to it. So then you just got to incubate the stuff. How do you incubate them? Well, you pick the right area of microclimate that's outside. The right amount of shade, fresh air exchange is really important. A lot of times you kind of want that corner of the house or area, barn, farm, whatever, that kind of stays shaded and kind of stays damp, and that's usually a good place to incubate. Direct sunlight can be bad for most of these things that you're going to try to cultivate, but ambient light is also very important. Okay, most of the strains and sources and stuff and methods that I've described here that are going to work together need some light. Okay, they're not growing in a cave. Okay, mushrooms that grow in a cave, that's definitely gonna be into the compost level of process, which adds a whole nother layer, and it's a lot more complex. Okay? So, that takes me about to the end of that. I did want to say about mushroom storage, fresh or wild mushroom care and storage. I wanted to kind of go over that a little bit. So, wild mushrooms should be eaten within a couple of days of purchasing them. Hopefully you're purchasing them from a reliable source. My farm offers them at most of the local farmers markets. Fresh mushrooms from the store should be eaten within a couple days also. But when you get them at a farmer's market, whoever you've got them from, fresh cultivated mushrooms can last several weeks. Okay? Keep them in the fridge, let them breathe. Okay? I've got my whole deli drawer thing in my fridge, right? And it's just chock full of wild mushrooms and fresh cultivated mushrooms just open. Okay? They just sit there and just very slowly dry out. And I had a customer the other day that got some shiitake from me, and 2 or 3 weeks went by, and I could tell from across the market the way that he looked over, he had forgotten about his mushrooms. Something went off, and he looked, he saw me and he went, oh boy. The next market, he came over and he said, wow, yeah, I totally forgot about that, and it sat for 3 weeks. And it was just kind of dried out. I put it in some water, and not only did it rehydrate just perfect, but then the liquor that was left was so incredible I couldn't throw it out. I had to make some gravy with that, and he was all excited about how it had improved in quality by leaving it in his fridge for 3 weeks. Okay? So if you do it right, mushrooms fresh from a farmer's market or something are that much better than the store-bought ones. You could never do this with store-bought mushrooms. They're wrapped in plastic, okay? They can't breathe. They're always harvested before they spore out, because the spore on those button mushrooms and portobello mushrooms is not good to eat. It will make you sick. They've even identified the compound, and I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's a very well-known scientific fact, okay? So there's some advice too. If you're a fan of portobellos, make sure you get those gills out of there. That's really important. Scrape the gills off of a portobello before you cook it and eat it. Let them breathe. That's really the big thing. I serve them up in paper bags. I hope most mushroom farmers are doing that nowadays. I'm always suspect of them in that are wrapped in plastic or prepackaged. If it's in one of these clamshells or something, mushrooms are produce and they're fruit. I'm not a fan of buying an apple or any other kind of piece of fruit that's wrapped up in something. I'm going to pick through the thing and I'm going to pick the apple I want, And that's how I serve my stuff up at markets, and that's how they should be served up, I think, at markets, okay? So, I don't go around and shop at other people's mushroom stands at markets, so I don't know how they're being offered, okay? So I'm just, putting the advice out there of, why I do it this way and what you should be looking for, okay? All right, anybody got any more questions?
Maybe I have a bunch of really dumb questions.
Great.
So why, if you go to Kroger and they have 2 kinds of mushrooms, why is that?
Mm-hmm.
Is it harder to grow the other kinds, or?
So, most of those, commercial mushroom cultivation nowadays is done in factories, literally factories. They're almost, they are like genetic copies of each other, right? There's no variation in them. They want the uniform look and appearance and everything, and so they're grown in, like I said, a sterile environment. Why do they offer a couple different kinds? Because I think they're kind of aware that there's, people don't know, and I don't know what number to throw out there at you, right? There's currently 4 or 5 gourmet mushroom types that are getting popular and well known, you know? I mean, shiitake and blue oyster and lion's mane, okay? Plus your portobellas and the baby bellas and the crimini. There's only really two species that are grown for your supermarket. You got your white button mushroom agarics, and then your portobellas. Okay, basically a brown agaric. It's also agaric. Okay, so they're even in the same family. Okay, so this comes from the European method. Okay, started in France, in caves, you know, kind of like blue cheese, you know. I mean, they like to grow stuff in caves in France, I guess, you know. And that developed in a bubble, okay. The gourmet mushrooms learned how to be cultivated and developed in Asia. Okay, so they're that different. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question. Okay, yeah, the Bob Starr answer. It takes me that long to say yes. They are different. They grow differently. Okay, but yeah, that's basically it. They're all set up the French method, the European method, and that's all they can grow. Okay, and they're poisonous at that. Okay, if you really look into it and find out, you know, like I said, with the spore and that, and so they're already set up this way, and people that are only interested in profit, that's all that they care about or see. So, you know, I mean, they've got, what's their motivation to start growing the good healthy mushrooms the Asian way? There's not much. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, what else? Yeah.
Do you think it's not about the medicinal qualities?
Oh yeah, sure, lots. You know, yeah. So from a food perspective, right, mushrooms are all a great source of protein, okay? And I believe that anything you put in your body is medicine, anything you eat, okay? So yeah, I mean, at the basic level, you know, like shiitakes are a great source of vitamin D. Different mushrooms offer some different nutrients. Lion's mane is great for neurological health. So the most important thing I can say about the medicinal value of mushrooms today is be careful, because I started out early in the speech here saying you are what you eat. I don't know if you remember that, okay? So there was finally a study done last year on lion's mane mushroom tinctures, okay? The big question being, why is the medical community not adopting this as heavily as the apothecary community is? Okay? Well, because of the variation is what the medical community answered. Said, we can't work with something unless we know it's this many milligrams of that compound, it's doing this. Okay, I get that. As a scientist, I totally get that, right? What I didn't know is that there's wild variation in that content, in the stuff that's being produced. So the study that was done said, where's the variation coming from? And they grew different strains, okay, of lion's mane in different substrates. And they found out you are what you eat. Okay? You can grow lion's mane on cheap garbage, waste materials, okay? And that's what you're going to get. You're going to get cheap waste material product stuff, right? Another thing that I, you know, why I do super pasteurization instead of sterilization. Same thing. It just, to me, it's just common sense. The mycelial colony has to fight for its life. If it has no resistance and there's nothing to fight against, why would it produce the enzymes that it needs to be strong? It doesn't. The proof is in long-term cultures that die out with mushroom farming because they lost all virility. Okay? The mycelium will grow. I can take it and I can grow up grain and I can cultivate that and I can get my substrate to grow up and colonize and it won't fruit. It has absolutely no biological imperative to reproduce. Okay? So, these are the things that science is just starting to get into depth and start investigating, right? So, that's really the most important thing. What am I really getting? There's a lot of snake oil out there, unfortunately. Okay, and a lot of it's unintentional. People, they mean to be providing you something good. They're just very ignorant, and all they've got these blinders on. They're after the profit, and they're just trying to crank out as much lion's mane as they can. There's other subtle tells. Okay, I'll tell you, there's other subtle tells like in the taste. Okay, I didn't know any of this. I had no idea of any of that until I had customers starting to come to me and ask me why the other person's lion's mane that they bought was bitter. I mean, like horribly bitter. They had a problem with it, okay? But they had gotten lion's mane from me and had some from out in the wild, and it was super sweet, like snow crab meat. And they wanted to know why. I really couldn't answer them. Well, now I can. You are what you eat. So they drew that stuff on, made a really bitter mushroom.
What do you think of canned mushrooms?
Canned mushrooms are great, they preserve really, really well. Canning them is one of the preferred methods. I can my shiitake, and of course it depends a little bit on the species, but what else? Maitake or hen of the woods, that's in season now. That pickles really well. It also cans really well. There's a lot of mushroom species that if they're not processed, you really wouldn't enjoy them, or there's some that you definitely would not want to eat at all, okay? And you can buy them, you can buy canned mushrooms in Poland and France, Finland, I'm sure there's other places as well, that every authority and resource that you could find in America is going to tell you that's poison, okay? They've been canning it and processing it and canning it over there, for hundreds of years. Okay? So canned mushrooms is great. I have confidence that this has been processed, right? I mean, it's not, even if it was a button mushroom or a portobello, the stuff that's actually technically poison, it's been canned. Now I know it's going to last a long time. It's still got all that protein, right? Yeah. And, it may have lost a lot of the higher end nutrients that got cooked off in the canning process, but, that's okay, yeah. So I'm a real fan of canned mushrooms, yeah.
What do you think about the stuff that's common now that I see all over Facebook and whatnot, the like mushroom coffee and mushroom chocolate milk or whatever it is?
Sure,
Like, what do you think of those?
Yeah. So chaga.
Or
So, I'm sorry?
are they like beneficial, do you think, or is that just a bunch of hokum?
Well, definitely, there's definitely a lot of benefits, but again, it's quality of source, what are you getting? Because, most of these, they're just really concerned with profits, okay? I offer mushroom coffee, okay? It's just chaga. Chaga is just a sterile conch that's developed in the tree as it's trying to heal from the infection of the mycelium that's in there infecting it. Chaga only grows effectively for this fruit that we're looking for. Call it fruit. It's the one that's not fruit. In birch, and I have a stand of paper birch in northern Minnesota. The softer the birch wood, the better quality the chaga. Okay, because literally, again, it's this mycological fight that's going on. Okay. That's what you want. It's basically a tree scab, okay? And there's companies out there that are cutting birch forests down, killing trees, okay, to harvest this chaga. This is a real problem for me because the tree can live in symbiosis with the chaga infection for 200 years.
Oh wow, so they don't have to kill the trees.
Right.
Oh man.
Right. Now, the line is, you know, there, I think that the main one was mud, okay? And their main story was that they're harvesting from trees that are being cut down anyway. That may well be. Maybe they follow around, you know, builders that are clearing land and I don't know, okay?
The leftovers or something that they can't use.
Right, but I can tell you that chaga cannot be grown. Okay, this is, I mean, it's just beyond our most advanced class, okay? Because again, it's not the mushroom fruit body that's coming out there. It's the tree is infected, and this is the scab that forms. Okay, so you have to have a living tree, okay, to even have chaga being produced. Okay, I harvest the chaga from my grove, and I try and do it as sustainably as possible. I cut the chaga off, so, you know, I'm basically, you know, picking the scabs of the trees, okay? And, you know, they'll basically kind of, you know, heal back up over that, you know, and then it's still infected, so it's going to produce another, you know, another spot for me to harvest later on. So why we do it, what's most beneficial about it? The chaga is about antioxidants. You get more antioxidants per unit in chaga than anything else known on the planet. That might be old information, it's probably been 10 years since I learned that, but at that time that was what it was for. Yeah. Yep. And I encourage people to make their own blend. I'm kind of a self-service apothecary with my herbs and spices and stuff like that, and so, you know, like my chaga, I grind it fresh, because again, when you open that up and you grind it, you start losing some of the stuff, right? So I'll only grind like 10 units, and my units are half an ounce, and I get $5 for a half ounce, which will make 12 cups of like espresso strong mushroom coffee, or 36 cups of mild strength mushroom tea.
Now, does that actually have coffee in it too, or
No.
is it just?
It's just the chaga ground up, that's it. Yep. I don't mix anything
I'm not
up.
a coffee drinker, but I've always wondered that, because I love any mushroom I've ever had.
Right on. Yeah, it's got by itself. It's just got kind of a smoky, earthy flavor. I always feel like I'm gonna be making some s'mores when I have it for some reason. Just imbues that to me. Okay, so like campfire and s'more time, and I have some chaga, and it can taste just like coffee if you put in about half as much sugar and twice as much cream as what you normally would use. But most of my customers use that at the level of a 1/16 of a teaspoon is a dose, and they just throw that into their whatever morning drink, and that's all the antioxidants you could ever ask for, you know. And then I've got all kinds of other mushrooms for medicinal use, you know, reishi, which is great for the flow of your chi. Okay, reishi's kind of the finisher. But like once you get to where you feel good and you know you think everything is basically working right for you and everything, then you want to start on some reishi tea, and because that's gonna it's gonna smooth out the rough edges that might be there and just keep everything like that. Okay, and so reishi is an excellent source. Let's see what else. Birch polypore is one of the most underappreciated medicinal mushrooms. That's the one that was found in some, whatever Neolithic caveman or whatever had it in his pouch to carry fire, and in his stomach, and they also found remnants of I think it was a bacterial infection he had in his stomach that had been cured by the mushroom. Okay, at that point, the Johns Hopkins University and people, they jumped all over that, and now there's a list of compounds that long that they're studying to try and fraction out, because if they don't fraction it out, well, you can't patent nature, right? But if you fraction it out and turn it into a pill, well, then you can patent it, especially if you can make that chemical compound itself in the lab. Okay, so there's a lot of health benefits for the mushrooms. I myself, I'm a fan of the natural way of doing things. So I'll make teas with the mushrooms or decoction. I don't do alcohol at all, so I won't do tinctures, you know? There's nothing wrong with that, to each their own, you know? What else? I don't, bless you, I don't stop with the mushrooms at that either. I keep on to go into like the lichens, okay? Like usnea lichen, right? This is like the best antibiotic that you can find in nature. Most nurses know about this and whatnot, you know? And, so yeah, I extend that, you know. Lichens aren't really in the fungal kingdom, but they're so closely related, you know. So, what else?
Freezing fresh mushrooms?
Yeah, not a great idea. There are some species that do okay. Oysters get like very rubbery at best when you unfreeze them. Shiitakes and a lot of other species will just disintegrate when you freeze them. Also freeze-dried mushrooms. That's great for scientific preservation, okay? You can propagate the spore that's been freeze-dried, okay? A long time later, okay? But you don't want to eat that because it's completely lost its tooth. The bite is just gone. I mean, if you're gonna put them in a soup and they're gonna, dissolve anyway and cook down, okay, but you really lose a lot. So that was something really important to me as I went into my business, and yeah, I decided on dehydration rather than freeze drying because of that. And now there are a few species that it works okay. Chanterelle, some of the polypore species like chicken of the woods, they work okay to freeze, but what you want to do if you're going to freeze them is blanch them first, okay? And so, just put them in, boil your water, throw them in the boiling water and set the timer for 2 minutes, scoop them out of the boiling water, put them into cool water and let them cool. Now you can go ahead and freeze them, and you're not going to be freezing all of that extra biological stuff that you don't necessarily want to, bring with you.
So you would dehydrate them? You dehydrate them?
Yeah,
Oh.
that's my preferred most. You can dehydrate all the mushrooms, and a lot of them will rehydrate almost like they were fresh again. Yeah, like shiitake, you could, well, like I said, that one customer, if they've been dehydrated correctly at low temperature over a long period of time, then a lot of them will rehydrate almost to where you could put them in a salad. Yeah. Yes.
My husband wants me to ask about morel mushrooms.
What about?
Have you ever grown them? Like,
So
do you sell them or anything?
I checked my agar plates before I came. Okay, I do still have both modes of reproduction going for local blonde morel mushrooms. Okay, one mode of growth in morel mushroom is cell division. Okay, like you would like asexual cell division, right? So it's just propagating, reproducing itself. Cells are splitting and growing. The other form is actual mycelial growth, and so I do have some of that, and it's progressed from aerial mycelium to what we call microsclerota, which is a really, really good sign. So I am trying because the patent is out. That's really important. Why don't we have morel mushrooms? Why aren't they at the store? Okay, we do know how to grow them, but it was patented in the 70s. Now, the patent is out. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you look, it is listed as patented deceased. Okay, so the guy died holding the patent. All right, there's a secondary and a tertiary on the patent, but neither is actively, successfully producing morel mushrooms. So, in effect, legally, the patent's dead. Okay, so if it wasn't for that, we would have morel mushrooms in the store. All right, they patented it, and they did it with such a broad stroke. Again, so many times, I lost count how many times I said today. They had blinders on, dollar signs in their eyes. Okay, And the mushroom geek that figured out how to grow it, the capitalists squeezed him so hard that he went ahead and patented it. And again, so broad of a stroke that if you grew, if you did anything, I mean, you couldn't do anything to be involved in the growing of the morels without stepping on his patent. So the only way you could sell morels is if they were wild. Like, I mean, it was even highly suspect if you had, wild mushrooms on your own property and you happen to be a mushroom farmer. You better not bring those to market and sell them because, the capitalists will be all over it. But they took that and they screwed it all up, all right? What happened? What happened? We don't live in a sterile world, okay? They were trying to do this, and in their thing, in a sterile world. And they tried it 3 other times since, okay? Every time, it's massive biological failure. Down the road, they get 1,000 pounds grown or something, successful. And then, there's so much sterilized stuff there that the wild, bad stuff gets in there and just takes over. And it's all over, okay? So, yeah, I'm hoping to have, some success. We'll see what happens, I mean, I can do it now. And I'm not the only one. There's others that are also realizing, because
We'll love it in the future or something.
yeah. Oh,
We'll
they're-
see them in stores.
Yeah. I mean, we'll definitely hear something. I mean, we may not see him in stores again, but there'll definitely be news on that front because it's only been a couple of years since the guy died.
Okay.
I've been doing this for I'm starting in my 9th season. Okay, and when I started, he was still alive. Okay, so I couldn't even approach it. All right. So what else?
This is really tough. If you were starting to do this, how do you know, like looking at this, that you don't have mold on your mushrooms? Or like when you were talking about growing them on the log, and you come up with something totally different, how do you know what you're looking at? And
Yeah. So.
is it, I don't know, I don't even know what I'm asking, but I would be so afraid of poisoning myself somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, even though you planted something, yourself, some sort of a resource like this, okay? Do you know what a biological key is? Okay, so a biological key, let me see if I can find a good example here. It just takes the whole page up here. I'm sure I can find one. Almost. There. Okay. So, this is what we call a biological key. This is key to mycenia, okay? And so it says 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6, okay? And it's stop at everything that they've asked you and say, do I meet all those requirements or not? Okay? And you just start to go down the list. So this one, it says, the base of stalk extending, exuding a red to blackish red juice when cut or squeezed. If that's yes, you move to number 2. The second number 1 says not as above. Okay, well it doesn't mean all that crazy stuff. I don't know what that red juice stuff is, whatever. Okay, so then I go to number 4. And you follow this key to your identification. Okay? There's a really good online resource called The Mushroom Expert. And he has taken it on himself to refresh this, okay? This was published in like 1980. I think it's on 2nd edition. It might be on 3rd edition now. I think this one is 2nd edition. Okay, but this guy has what we call keyed out or told you how to identify 800. It's 804, 2,000 species in 1980. Okay, that's got to be. There's a lot more now, right? But there's not very many other good, reliable keys. Okay, like I go for sources like the Audubon Society, okay? They've been around forever, you know, and very well published and trusted. They don't publish a key to mushrooms identification that I'm aware of, okay? You know, there's some risk for, you know, anybody that's, you know, gonna publish that, right? You know, and come up with it. So, but that's basically, that's what you do. That's how you know, is you run through the key and you say, this is what I've got.
Can you, cause you're a mushroom farmer, can you pretty much now know by just looking if it's, or do you still have questions yourself ever?
Yeah, I try really hard to maintain scientific process. You know, if I'm not vigilant about that, then I think people in general, overconfidence can kill you in mushroom hunting. Okay? And I mean, there's a great example. There's a doctorate of mycology that was, you know, so full of himself that, you know, he died of mushroom poison.
What are the kind of mushrooms that are in the cow fields that teenagers go out and get?
So, you know, psilocybin, I think, has a lot of potential as medicine. I think that Oregon is doing it right. Okay, so they've got, you know, licensed, experienced shamans that, you know, are running, they're also registered nurses, and they're running clinical trials for the medicinal benefits of psilocybin. And they're going to cure depression and post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety, and I don't mean take this pill for the rest of your life, you'll be okay. I mean, they go in and they sit down and they have treatment sessions and they come out cured. And there are now clinical published results for this, okay? And, you know, right now, the only people that have access to that are people who are residents of Oregon. So, hopefully that answers your question, right? There's a lot of, I'll add this, okay, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on, and especially with the way that the hemp industry is going, and I mean, Tennessee's on this side, and on that side, and on this side, and then, you know, I think Tennessee finally decided that they don't want to be in the hemp business, you know, I think that was their final answer now, right? But, I mean, you can go to gas stations even around here now and see mushrooms for sale, magic mushrooms, and they're grown in California, and they're coming in under the test detectable levels of psilocybin or psilocin, which are what we think are the most active and important compounds that are, you know, causing psychoactive medicine, you know, to work, okay? But again, it's just they're so worried about profit, right? And so I tell people to stay away from that stuff, and like, you can get these, you know, okay, microdosing, you know, little mushroom gummy bears or whatever, you know. A lot of those are giving you fly agaric. Okay, fly agaric is just straight up fly poison, okay? It's the iconic red-capped mushroom with white dots, okay? Right? You know, like in Mario Brothers or anything, right? You know? Okay. So, you know, also accredited supposedly to why Santa wears a red and white suit. I just read that the other day. That's from the Norse traditions, I guess. You know, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think they were from the UK, so I'm like, I don't know about that. But anyway, it is. What is the compound name in fly agaric? Muscarine containing, okay, which is poison, okay, and you know, this is shamanic at best, okay. It's so different from the psilocybin and psilocin that, you know, they're not even using it. It's not even in the studies they're doing in Oregon, okay? So, you know, I say don't mess with that stuff, you know? Literally it's fly poison. And I've got a really cool story about that I would just love to tell. Does anybody know the story about, okay, where exactly does the saying, you catch more flies with honey than vinegar, comes from? Well, you know why I'm telling the story, because it has something to do with mushrooms, okay? It has to do everything with fly agaric. This is also why we call that mushroom fly agaric, okay? Well, again, my mama raised me with all this stuff. We had some horses, and chemical strips or sprays to control flies in the horse barn was not a good idea, okay? And so you put a saucer of milk with fly agaric powder, which was nothing more than the fly agaric mushroom dried and powdered, into the milk. If you want to catch more flies, you put a little vinegar in, that curdles the milk, and the flies come more to it. But if you want to catch even more, you add a drop of honey, and now it's sweet, and you catch even more flies. Okay? Yeah. So it's still the best solution if somebody's got a horse barn and you want to control flies. You know, it's really, really cheap, you know, mushroom powder. But yeah, you know, and I even remember back into the 90s where, you know, you could still buy fly agaric mushroom powder, fly poison, you know, and that's all it was, you know. And so now I offer it to some of my, you know, customers. I mean, there's a lot of big old horse barns over here, you know, and, you know, yeah, I've got some people that use that, you know. So, but that's what they're feeding you when you get these micro-dosing mushroom gummies, okay? It's fly poison. Okay? They want profit, they gotta make their dollars, you know, and so they don't, no care at all, so, yeah. Okay. Anything else?
This is my last question.
No.
I was just wondering if you could comment on, because I'm really interested in mushrooms that read about the, I don't know, like anti-tumor properties and things that are, like, they seem amazing. I met this guy in a farmer's market in Charleston last month,
Okay.
and he has a mushroom farm, and he sells grow kits.
Okay.
And so this like skips a whole bunch of steps.
Yeah.
So you can buy the medium,
Uh-huh.
and I think within a month, he tells you where to put it, and how much water to put in, it will grow mushrooms.
Yeah.
And I think he said you can use it twice.
Mm-hmm. You
And
get
then
two flushes, sure.
you're done and you buy a new one, but, cause I've never done this, so I was like, oh, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Cause I can't buy lion's mane at Kroger.
Right. Yeah.
So, how does that sound to you?
Well, my first question would be, what is in the substrate? What exactly is it, okay? The things that were in the study that was published, okay? I didn't bring exactly where that's, I don't have like that link with me, because I could point you to that to show you exactly, right? But what they tested, right? At the basic level, I don't like the ones that are grown on GMO soy and or wood pellets, hardwood pellets. This is all a gigantic carbon footprint, if you can imagine. You know, GMO soy. I mean, we till, we plant, we spray, we mechanically harvest, we mechanically separate, we burn off the hull, then we pelletize it. Every one of these operations has an industrial sized carbon footprint. Granted, they're mass production things, so per unit it's not gigantic, but the important thing is the nutrients you're getting out of the mushroom that you want to grow. Well, all of that processing, right? Why are people's stomachs falling apart today when 30 years ago it wasn't? It's because of all the processing. The chemical age came in, and all the preservatives went into the food, and a whole generation ate all of that mass processed food, you know, and the long-term effect is this, right? Well, the long-term effect of all of this processing on those materials that are going into that substrate are that there's nothing there left for that mushroom to eat, and you wind up with a hollow shell of what it should be. Okay, so that's the first most important question. What is the substrate? If he says, okay, well, it's organic compost that, you know, we produce on our farm and pasteurize here, oh, awesome. You know, if he says, well, it's hardwood pellet or soy pellet, I'd say, wow, okay, you know, I think I would pass on that, you know, because it sounds like what you're after is the nutritional benefit of the mushrooms, not just the flashy show of, look at that white pom-pom thing I'm eating. You know, so yeah, that's I think the most important thing. Yeah. those kind of kits are available a lot of places and whatnot. Like at one point, Walmart had a bunch of those. You
Oh,
know?
wow.
Yeah, so, consider, other sources when you're looking at that too,
Yeah, this was a mushroom farmer.
Mhm.
This was like what
Yeah.
they do. They also were selling, little bottles of, he says processing the mushroom through alcohol and
Tincture,
adding
huh?
water. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
feel like that works?
Well,
the little bottles?
Yeah, it definitely does. But like I said, it's about the content. Garbage in, garbage out. And that basically what you've described there. That is the archetypical, what I would call a trust fund baby mushroom farm. Okay. Anybody with X dollars to put into it can build that business model up. Okay. A lot of it is, unfortunately, not true. There's a lot of them out there. I mean, like 4 out of the 8 mushroom farms that I've seen pop up in the greater Nashville area and then disappeared in the last 9 years, okay, were claiming all of this. But the truth is, they were buying that stuff from this giant mushroom factory down in Chattanooga and saying that they were producing all of this stuff. Okay, there was a couple of them directly I called out, and then whoops, they disappeared and quit. That wasn't really my goal exactly, but I just wanted them to tell the truth, So be careful, because it's like I said, people got dollar signs in their eyes, and that the perception is that mushroom farming can be very lucrative, and that's not true at all, and that's why they come up and then disappear. Okay, and that's why I've been around for 9 years. I got no resources at all. I live hand in mouth entirely. All I got is I own my stuff free and clear. Okay, but I have no family fund, anything like that at all. I'm unfortunately an island. My family's all with God and stuff, and so, but I'm still going. I'm still doing it, right? I because what's important to me is the quality of what I'm doing. Yeah. So, yeah. Be careful. Yeah, because I know you want great results. And
Seems like a good beginner starting one. Well, I won't poison myself with a kit, probably.
True.
But now I know what to ask.
I bought one from a farmer's market in Spring Hill, and my wife threw it away.
Oh, really?
Oh, it just didn't grow
So
anything good, or it went bad, or what?
She
didn't-
just sold it and said, and she didn't even let me
She didn't
explain
like
what it
She
was.
didn't like it. She didn't like the idea. Huh? Yeah. So, but I mean, they're a lot of fun. So they're great.
What do you do any foraging walks,
That was
talks?
my question too.
Yeah. Yes, I do. And so when I go out, I try to put it up on like the Facebook and say, here's where I'm going to be. It's difficult for me to get people to commit to it. So generally, when I do that kind of stuff, I just try and leave it open-ended and say, okay, this is the trailhead I'm going to be at that time, and I'll wait 10-15 minutes, and if nobody's there, I just head out on my own. I'm working with more and more of the state parks around. I do a lot of volunteer work. I'm retired. I don't work for anybody else. Okay, so not to say that I have a retirement fund that I live on at all either. Okay, but until Social Security kicks in, I'm just kind of the in between. But I'm working with the state parks because I want to offer that kind of stuff more actively, right, and get more people involved, right? And they have a new imperative to have each ranger bring in and host 2 company or public paid events, like per month or something. One of the rangers, I just found out about this. So a long story to say that I am trying real hard to find a spot where I can get into the Tennessee Naturalist Program and get certified, and then the doors will really open, because that's kind of the hitch that they have. Like the state parks, they can't really get behind me and say, yeah, okay, come out and have a Forage with Bob day, you know, because I don't have any kind of certification, okay? I have my word that I've been doing it since this big and 9 years of selling stuff and never killing anybody, you know, and it's, you know, you gotta have something nowadays. So as soon as I can get that, then there'll be more, you know, of those things going on. Okay, so yeah, follow me on the Facebook. I'm the only Pilgrimage Farm on there, and you know, yeah. As the season kicks up right now, yeah, I'm fixing to start scheduling a lot of that stuff. Yeah, I mean, I just brought in over 30 pounds fresh, choice, ringless honey mushrooms. You know, if you're out driving around and whatnot, you know, you might happen to see a whole bunch of blobs in somebody's yard as you go by, and you know, that might be ringless honey mushrooms. You know, they're in big right now. I also just brought in 4-pound hen of the woods. It's about that big and about that tall. You know, just one mushroom. You know, hen of the woods just came in, and so yeah, forage season is on. So you know, but yeah, I mean,